the last short story of ghostly tales and curious stories from England. The final journey. I knew what it was like to be out of body. The first time it happened unexpectedly. I was lying on my back on my bed in California, my hands behind my head and my ankles crossed, just relaxing and trying to get rid of the negative things going through my mind. I was in a dark place, upsets in my marriage, not knowing where to take my life. And then suddenly it felt as though hundreds of thousands of electric volts were pulsating and entering through my ankles. I couldn't move. It was as though huge pressure in my back was pushing me off the bed and up into the room. I was surrounded by the most incredible golden light, and I realized I didn't have to breathe. I was just existing. The peace and happiness was overwhelming. If this was death, I was happy to go forward. I didn't want to get back into my body. I looked down on myself lying there so peacefully. With a slight movement, I was hovering over the school next door, watching the children playing in the yard. Next thing I knew, I was back on my bed. After that, it was easy to get out of body and to experience it again and again. So dying was just a further happening. I was expecting it because I had known for some time that the end, or rather, the beginning, was coming nearer. The feeling of peace was overwhelming. The lightness in my body exceeded anything I had ever known. I was on my final journey. There was the tunnel people talked about, but it was more like a strip of light, getting brighter as I progressed through this magical place. I could see shadows against the golden glow. These were family and friends coming to meet me and to show me the ropes. You are never allowed to go to the other side on your own because it could be frightening. Gradually they became clearer. There was my mother, and slightly behind her, my father. Other people crowded towards me. I couldn't remember who some of them were, but I guessed we had known or been part of each other's lives over 1,000 years or more. I did recognize my servant from Egyptian days, holding a dog on a beautiful lead. My dog from that period, and the one I had just left. I recognized her because I had always thought she looked like Anubis, the jackal god of the underworld. Her big ears, sticking up sharply on her head, and the long pointed nose were identical to the creature I had walked in the beautiful city on the edge of the River Nile, as we now call it. Although I was surrounded, nobody touched me. I was as yet unclean. All their robes were almost dazzlingly white, while mine a dull, almost grey colour. I learnt later that they were dressed like this for this momentous welcoming ceremony. At all other times people wore the richest and brightest colours of every type of style. They led me to the Temple of Remembrance and Sorrow, a place everyone must visit as soon as they reach the other side. I knew what was coming and was fearful. I had to face my past life and see and feel the hurt I had done to everyone while still on earth. There in front of me was a huge screen, much like a big modern television I had left behind. Gradually people passed across the screen, which was encased in a sort of table. Although there was no sound, I could hear what had been said or done. The agony of seeing myself behaving in such ways, towards people I loved, and yet let down, made me want to drop down onto my knees and beg for forgiveness. but somehow knew I was receiving their understanding and that they were forgiving me. But of course they understood and were forgiving. They'd all been there themselves, some of them like myself many times. I don't know how long I was in this room of sorrows. It seemed like a whole lifetime, but it was probably only a matter of earthly seconds. It was over, and I was ready to meet my family and friends. As the door swung open, I realized my robe was as white and dazzling as all of theirs. They looked younger than I last remembered them, and completely free of any disabilities they had suffered on earth. We had a wonderful party, nothing like that on earth. No food or drink, but more a meeting of joyous minds. I wandered through amazing gardens, full of beautifully scented roses and glorious climbing shrubs. All my former animals gamboled along with me, glad that at long last I had come home. Later I would visit other temples, some dedicated to music or literature, some to learning, and one where I would meet up with my own spirit guides to discuss what I had achieved and learnt in the latest lifetime, and whether I needed to return to experience more earth lessons. But that would be my choice when, and if I decided to return. How many more lives would it take to reach the level of wisdom where I could teach others, perhaps as a spirit guide? These guides have lived on earth and understand, not angels who have never lived as we live, but our guides had been through everything we have done and know our strengths and weaknesses. Right now, I never want to go back again. The lessons get harder and tougher,